The Titanic sank 109 years ago. Why hasn't it been salvaged until now? What is the reason for this? On April 10, 1912, the Titanic was the most luxurious yacht in the world, embarking on its first voyage. But only after 4 days, while traveling on the sea, this yacht crashed into the ice mountain, which caused its middle part to break. The sailor quickly repaired urgently, but it was still unable to fix. It finally sank to the bottom of the sea. And at this time on the yacht there were 1,517 people, and there was a large amount of gold and jewels. When looking back at this terrible accident, certainly everyone has a big question. Why hasn't a ship so expensive been salvaged yet? And there were still many bodies of the victim, as well as gold and silver, jewels inside this yacht. In fact, with technical level at that time, finding the location as well as salvaging the ship was extremely difficult. This ship sank at a depth of 3,700 meters, so there was no way to reach it, and no one could withstand the enormous pressure of water. Until 73 years after the boat sank, the US just used unmanned cameras to investigate the Titanic. They found that when the ship was sunk, its weight was 25,000 tons. This caused it to sink to the bottom of the sea, and no way to salvage it. However, the discussion of how to salvage the Titanic everywhere in the world has never stopped. Among them, many strange ways have been applied. There was an architect named Charles suggesting using a magnet to suck the Titanic out of the sea. Someone also suggested putting a large amount of ping-pong balls into the boat, or using 500,000 tons of nitrogen solution to freeze the boat. After that, it would rise out of the water. However, these methods have proven not to be feasible, and they were completely inapplicable. Experts believed that salvaging the whole boat was impossible. It would certainly be shattered while salvaging, so they neglected this yacht lying on the bottom of the sea. With the current technology, they could only pick up the items involving this yacht. The British shipping company named White Star Line was the only company that could legally collect antiques inside the Titanic. As of 2012, Titanic had sunk for 100 years. At that time, they could use a diving robot to pick up some antiques. These items cost more than £200 million. Last year, the company claimed they had researched a special robot. Without cutting off the ship, it could enter from the roof of the ship, in order to take back to the radio system that Marconi used to transmit the last signal to the Titanic. At the same time, the UK and the US government signed the clause in 2020. They ordered a ban on taking items inside the Titanic, because they hoped the victims who were sunk on the bottom of the Atlantic could rest in peace. Moreover, the Titanic has been corroded for a long time, so it was no longer as solid as it used to be. Experts have predicted by 2030, Titanic's body may not be many more. It will eventually corrode completely. This was considered the largest shipwreck in humanity. The ship was called Never Sinking. On its first voyage, it hit an ice mountain. The boat was split in half. There were countless people sunk to the bottom of the sea. At the moment of life and death, the band on ship weren't still worried at all. They still performed calmly. The men were extremely polite and gallant. They gave up the chance of survival to women and children, and they accepted to sink with the ship. However, is that true? Facing with an accident, whether people are really noble like that? Although the film is based on historical factors, there are still some details that are extremely bombastic. At that time, even the media also had a certain distortion and exaggeration. However, the truth is probably far more intense than we might think. According to the statistical results of some scholars, the survival rate in the first-class cabin was up to 67%. The survival rate in third-class cabin was only 32%, of which there were 79 children in the third-class cabin, but only 27 people survived. This rate was almost the same as the proportion of men surviving in the first-class cabin. There was a noblewoman named Gordon, and her husband just getting on the lifeboat. They immediately gave the sailor £5 and told him to leave quickly. While the lifeboat could contain up to 64 people, however, at that time on the boat there were no more than 32 people. The president of the White Star Line company named Joseph. When the accident happened, he mercilessly left his wife and children behind, and ignored the women and children on the boat. He ran away alone. In fact, the priority for children and women in this case wasn't absolutely happened. Meanwhile, it was easy to see that the priority for the rich has been taken over. In this accident, there was also a man named Masabumi Hosono in the Titanic. He was the tycoon of the Japanese transportation industry. In a way, he should give the chance to the lifeboat for the women and children, but he disputed for the last place on the lifeboat. Thanks to that, he survived. It was reported that at that time, he was even pretending to be a woman, and pushed the women and children down to get on the lifeboat. Therefore, Masabumi Hosono was seen as a coward. He was even seen as a negative example included in textbooks, which became disgrace to Japan. 27 years after that accident, when he died, he was still laughed at and badly scolded. In his relic, there was a diary that he had written down everything he wrote as he jumped on the lifeboat. He wore the traditional Japanese-style coat, so that people thought it was women's clothing. However, no matter what the truth is, we also don't need to criticize them too much. Sacrifice and selfishness are two factors that always exist in parallel in each human personality. Moreover, when facing with danger, finding a way to live is human instinct. If one day an accident happened to you, what would you do?